The crypto community celebrated a big win this week with the U.S. Court of Appeals ruling in favor of firm Grayscale. But late yesterday, the SEC delayed a decision on a round of Bitcoin ETF applications. Joining us now, Anthony Pompliano, founder and partner of Pomp Investments. Anthony, great to have you here on set, but great to have you back in New York. What did you make of this whole thing?
I don't think anyone was really surprised with the delays yesterday, the 6 delays. Gives them another 45 days to kind of figure it out. One of the important things about the SEC's loss in that lawsuit was the judge didn't say, hey, you have to approve the ETF. They just said that you have to go back and figure out, are you going to approve or deny it on other kind of causes? And so, look, we have futures-based ETFs. I think we will get a spot Bitcoin ETF. The question is when. One of the things that people aren't talking about, though, is this ETF is going to be a demand shock, right? There is going to be assets that flow into this industry when that occurs, but closer and closer we get to the halving, it will coincide with a supply shock in that halving, and I think that we could see a repeat of 2020 where we go up quite significantly in price if that occurs.
Wow. Let's sort of back up. In terms of the price action in response to the overturning of the decision, we saw all of those gains wiped out. And you said that it's sort of not a surprise. So, I mean, why did we see those gains in the first place? And what is so the play right now is to be long, is what you're saying.
I think that Bitcoin's really interesting. It was up like 80% to start the year. It's now down to about 60% up since the start of the year. In July and August, it was down. September's historically been a pretty bad month for Bitcoin. So you get some of those like seasonality type stuff that are playing in here as well. But people who pay attention every single day to the crypto industry, they're not surprised. I think what's happening, though, is you've had kind of a turning of the holder base, right? You used to have all crypto native people who held Bitcoin. Now you're starting to get more Wall Street people, kind of retail investors. And so those people who don't pay attention 24/7, 365, they're probably a little surprised, but the crypto native folks, they kind of expected this.
What do you think about the way that Gensler, the head of the SEC, has navigated this whole thing?
Yeah, I think he's got an impossible job, right? If you think about what the regulators have to do is they basically want to encourage innovation. And, I call it like embracing the entrepreneurial DNA of the United States. And we want to be a leader, both in capital markets and in technology. At the same time, they want to protect investors. And so I think that what they've been very clear about is their perspective, which is Bitcoin is the asset that has kind of passed through that regulatory threshold. It is not a security, it's a commodity. And they're kind of treating it that way. The rest of the assets, they obviously think are securities. And so there's obviously some litigation that's going on. There's a lot of debate and I think disagreement between the crypto community and regulators. But the beauty of America is that people will go to court, they're going to lay out their arguments, and the courts will decide. Sometimes the regulators will be right. Other times the regulators won't be right. But that's why we have those court systems and the judicial system, and it makes America the greatest country in the world.
You sound, admittedly, I'm kind of surprised. You sound a little more sympathetic towards Mr. Gensler, as maybe I would have expected, because many who share your passion and advocacy for Bitcoin have been much more harsh towards him.
At the end of the day, we can yell and scream, we can argue, name call, do all the things that people do, but we still have to work together, right? At the end of the day, the regulators are always going to be the regulators. And so my thought process is if we spend our time more focused on educating and kind of trying to bridge that gap, get them to understand why this technology is important, how it's already helped quite a bit of people, that's probably a more productive use of energy and time than it would be to sit and just yell and scream at each other. Because at the end of the day, the yelling and the screaming just gets people to dig their heels in, and then people don't want to work together, right? But my belief is that a Bitcoin ETF will be approved in the United States of America. It will lead to billions and billions of dollars of inflows. At the same time, I think that regulators are having to get up to speed. They're getting educated. And the more that they learn, the more they realize the technology is not going away. I mean, stablecoins is like a story that I think regulators are kind of scratching their head around. We've seen $11 trillion of transaction volume settled with stablecoins. That's the same transaction volume as Visa. Right? So when you start to think about this, you're like, wait a minute, nobody uses that stuff except for the dollar on blockchain is used just as much as Visa is used. That is a mind-blowing statistic where regulators, technologists, and frankly, politicians all have to get together and decide how are we going to use this technology? Because if we don't do it here in the United States, people internationally are going to continue to use this. And we're seeing international usage and adoption of these technologies explode. Does America want to be a leader or do we want to be a follower? Historically, we've been a leader, so let's go lead.
Let's go back and assume that a Bitcoin ETF is approved. How do you think about the trades? We saw initially Coinbase go up, but you sort of wondered, do you need something like a Coinbase if you can buy an ETF on any exchange, on your Schwab account, for instance? So how do you think about it?
So, we're an investor in Coinbase, have been for a long time, and I think that if you're a retail investor and you wanted exposure to Bitcoin over the last 2, 3, 5 years, you probably went and figured out a way to do it, right? And so I don't think that there's a ton of inflows that are going to be happening from retail investors. I do think, though, that sovereign wealth funds or very large institutions, they're not going on Coinbase and buying, spot Bitcoin, right? And so I think that that's where the ETF inflows could happen. I think Coinbase has done a fantastic job. They've onboarded more people to Bitcoin than any other company in the country or in the world. And if you look at, by being a public company, what they've really done is they've held the flag and said, look, we want to be a regulated institution. We want to be a big brand. I think they're doing a fantastic job.
You talked about a moment. I want to just get back real quick to use case stuff. You talked about stablecoins and you talked about these astounding statistics that you pointed out. What about for Bitcoin? Do you think we're closer now, any closer now than we were, let's say, 2 years ago, about real use case for Bitcoin? Because I feel like that's still suspect.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question, right? And the first part of that, you have to define what is the use case. And so some people will say, hey, it's a store of value. We're going to buy it, we're going to hold it, we're never going to sell it, and it's going to be this amazing way to protect our purchasing power. Other people want it to be the electronic cash that was kind of mentioned in the white paper, and we're going to all drop dollars and go spend Bitcoin. I tend to think that there's a sequence to it. Maybe it becomes that electronic cash, maybe it doesn't. I'm not sure. But I know today for sure it's being used as that store of value. It's $500 billion asset. There's tens of millions of people, if not hundreds of millions of people around the world that buy it, they hold it, and they simply just want to protect their purchasing power, right? You could think of it as like a digital gold. And from that standpoint, holding is a use case, right? Now, if you then start to evolve the definition of use case and say, hey, I need it to be that electronic cash, sure, it has really high transaction volumes and has all these different applications that people are trying to build, but I don't think anyone with a straight face would say, hey, Bitcoin is replacing the US dollar today for the majority.
I mean, people have done that, though. Plenty of people have actually tried to make that case. Have you mellowed somewhat on Bitcoin?
No, I'm still incredibly bullish on this.
Who are you and what'd you do with Anthony Pompliano?
No, it's just understanding, I think, that when you look at crypto assets in general, right, the market data is changing. And so one of the things that I find most fascinating is people in the industry seem to be buying Bitcoin and holding it. And they're using that to protect their purchasing power. And then if you're in Argentina, I talked to an Argentinian entrepreneur recently, and he said to me, everyone in Argentina wants to get out of the peso, right? Obviously, it's 100% inflation. It's this horrible situation. But they're not going and buying Bitcoin immediately. What they're doing is they actually want stablecoins, right? And the reason why they want stablecoins is because they want to get paid in dollars from their companies. They want to pay other people, et cetera. And so if you buy Bitcoin and you're using that as your store of value, and then you're using a stablecoin to actually transact value, that seems, again, it's what the market's showing us. That's what people are doing.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you guys as well.
Welcome back.
Appreciate
to New
it.
York.